This happened in December of 2023, about a year ago now, and I still think about it every time I see a train station. At the time, I was 23 years old and finally working up the courage to leave a relationship that had been slowly destroying me for almost 3 years. My girlfriend, Amanda, wasn't physically abusive, but she had this way of making me feel like I was losing my mind. She'd go through my phone, accuse me of cheating when I worked late, and then apologize with tears and promises that things would get better. They never did. I'd tried to leave twice before, but each time she'd threatened to hurt herself, and I'd stay. I felt trapped, guilty, and honestly, I didn't know who I was anymore outside of that apartment we shared. My older brother, Marcus, lived in Chicago. When I finally called him one night and told him everything, he didn't hesitate. He said to pack whatever I could carry and get on the next train. He'd have a room ready for me, no questions asked, for as long as I needed. So that's what I did. I waited until Amanda left for her night shift at the hospital. Then I grabbed my backpack, stuffed it with clothes, my laptop, and whatever else I could fit. The only other thing I took was my acoustic guitar in its hard case. My dad had given it to me before he passed away, and there was no way I was leaving it behind. Everything else, the furniture, the kitchen stuff, the books, I left it all. I took an Uber to the Amtrak station in Detroit. My train wasn't leaving until 4:00 a.m., and it was only 11:00 p.m. when I arrived. I knew I'd be there for hours, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be gone before Amanda got home and tried to talk me out of it again. The Detroit station at night is not a welcoming place. The fluorescent lights made everything look sickly and washed out. There were maybe a dozen other people scattered around on the plastic chairs, most of them half asleep or staring at their phones. It was cold too, that bitter December cold that seeps through your jacket no matter how many layers you're wearing. I found a spot near the ticket counter where I could keep an eye on my stuff and sat down with my backpack between my feet and my guitar case leaning against my leg. The station didn't have lockers, or if it did, I couldn't afford to use them. I had about $300 in cash to my name and a debit card. I was terrified Amanda might freeze somehow. I'd been sitting there for maybe 20 minutes when a woman approached me. She looked to be in her mid-40s, wearing a puffy winter coat and a knit scarf. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she had a kind, tired-looking face. She was carrying a large purse and a thermos. "Rough night?" she asked, gesturing toward my guitar case. I gave her a polite smile. "Yeah, you could say that. Long way to head." She nodded sympathetically. "I hear you. I'm waiting for the 5030 to Cleveland." "Where are you headed?" "Chicago," I said. "Oh, nice. Visiting family?" "My brother." "Yeah." She smiled warmly. "That's good. Family's important, especially this time of year." She unscrewed her thermos and took a sip. "You want some coffee? I made way too much, and it's just going to get cold anyway." I shook my head. "No thanks, I'm good." "You sure?" "It's freezing in here. I'm okay, really, but thanks." She shrugged. "Suit yourself." Then she sat down a few chairs away from me, close enough to keep talking, but not uncomfortably close. "You know, if you're going to be here for hours, there's a diner just 2 blocks from here. Open 24 hours. Way more comfortable than these awful chairs, and they've got outlets, Wi-Fi, the whole deal. I usually wait there when I've got a long layover." I considered it for a second, but something about leaving my stuff or carrying all of it through an unfamiliar area at night didn't sit right with me. "I think I'll just stay here," I said. "But thanks for the tip." "No problem," she said, then went back to scrolling on her phone. I pulled out my own phone and texted Marcus to let him know I'd made it to the station. He responded immediately, telling me to be safe and that he'd pick me up at Union Station in the morning. That message made me feel a little less alone. About 30 minutes passed. I had my earbuds in, listening to music, when I noticed the woman stand up and walk past me toward the restroom. A few minutes later, she came back and sat down in the same spot. That's when I noticed someone else. There was a younger woman, probably in her mid-20s, sitting across the waiting area near the vending machines. She had earbuds in and was wearing a black puffer jacket and jeans. What caught my attention was that she'd been staring down at her phone the entire time, but her screen was black. She wasn't actually looking at anything. She was just sitting there, completely still, with the dark phone in her lap. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe her battery had died. Maybe she was just zoning out. I tried to focus on my music again. Around midnight, the older woman came back over to me. This time, she seemed more insistent. "Hey, I'm serious about that diner," she said. "They've got great pie, and honestly, you're going to be miserable sitting here for another 4 hours. I'm probably going to head over there myself in a bit." I forced a smile. "I really appreciate it, but I've got all this stuff and I don't want to deal with dragging it around." She tilted her head, looking almost concerned. "You can't just leave it here?" "Not really comfortable with that," I said. "Well, I mean, you could ask someone to watch it. I'd watch it for you if you wanted to grab food." That felt wrong. I didn't know her, and even if I did, I wasn't about to leave everything I owned with a stranger. "I'm good." "Really?" She stared at me for a moment longer than felt natural, then smiled again. "All right. Just trying to help." She walked back to her seat. I glanced over at the younger woman near the vending machines. She still hadn't moved. Her phone was still off. And now I was sure she was watching me. Not directly, but in that way where you can feel someone's attention even when they're not making eye contact. My heart started beating a little faster. I tried to rationalize it. I was stressed, exhausted, paranoid from everything with Amanda. I was probably imagining things, but I wasn't. An hour later, around 1:00 a.m., the older woman came over again. This time, she didn't sit down. She stood in front of me, thermos in hand. "Okay, look," she said, her tone a little sharper now. "I've been coming to this station for years, and I'm telling you, that diner is the place to wait. I don't know why you're being so stubborn about it." I looked up at her, surprised by the shift in her voice. "I'm not being stubborn. I just don't want to leave." "Why not?" she asked. "What's the big deal?" "I just don't feel like it," I said, trying to keep my tone even. She stared at me, and for the first time, her expression didn't look kind or tired. It looked annoyed, almost angry. "Fine," she said. "Waste your time freezing in here." She walked away, but this time she didn't sit back down. She walked toward the exit, pulled out her phone, and made a call. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but she kept glancing back at me while she talked. That's when the younger woman stood up. She didn't walk toward the exit. She didn't go to the bathroom. She just stood there, stretched a little, and then slowly started walking in my direction. Every instinct in my body told me to move. I grabbed my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and picked up my guitar case. I walked quickly toward the ticket counter where a bored-looking attendant was sitting behind plexiglass. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaky. "Is there a security office or something? Somewhere I can wait that's more secure?" The attendant looked at me like I was an inconvenience. "There's cameras everywhere." "You're fine. Can I just wait near you?" I asked. He sighed. "Sure, whatever." I sat down on the floor next to the counter, my back against the wall, and kept my eyes on the waiting area. The older woman had come back inside and was now standing near the entrance, talking to the younger woman. They were both looking at me. Then the older woman walked directly toward me. "What's your problem?" she said loudly. "Why are you acting so paranoid?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her. "You think you're too good to talk to people," she continued. "I offered you coffee." I tried to help you, and you're sitting there like I'm some kind of criminal." The attendant looked up from his computer. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" She glared at him, then at me, then turned and walked back toward the other woman. They exchanged a few words, and then both of them left the station. I sat there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. The attendant didn't say anything, but he kept glancing at me like I'd caused some kind of scene. Around 2:30 a.m., a transit police officer walked through the station on routine patrol. I stood up and approached him, feeling ridiculous but too scared to stay quiet. "Officer, I think someone was trying to, I don't know, mess with me or something." He stopped and looked at me. "What happened?" I explained everything. The woman, the diner, the younger woman watching me, the confrontation. He listened, then nodded. "Stay here," he said. "I'm going to check the security footage." He came back 15 minutes later with a serious expression. "You made the right call," he said. "We've had reports about a woman matching that description. She and another younger woman have been working the station for a couple of months. They target solo travelers, usually men, try to get them to leave the station. We think they're working with someone else outside. You're not the first person to report this." My stomach dropped. What would have happened if I went with her? He shook his head. "Nothing good. Probably robbery, maybe worse. We've been trying to catch them, but they're smart. They leave before we can move in." He stayed nearby for the rest of my wait, checking in occasionally. When my train finally arrived at 4:00 a.m., I'd never been so relieved to board. I texted Marcus everything as soon as I sat down. He called me immediately, furious and worried, and told me he'd be waiting at the station no matter how early I arrived. The train pulled away from Detroit, and I watched the dark city disappear behind me. I thought about how close I'd come to trusting that woman, to following her out of the station because I was cold and tired and vulnerable. I made it to Chicago safely. Marcus picked me up, and I stayed with him for 3 months while I got back on my feet. I eventually got my own place, started therapy, and rebuilt my life. Amanda tried to contact me a few times, but I blocked her number and moved on. But I never forgot that night at the station. If you're ever stranded somewhere alone, especially at night, trust your instincts. If someone is being overly persistent about getting you to leave a public area, there's usually a reason. Stay where there are cameras, security, and witnesses. Don't let politeness override your gut feeling. And if something feels wrong, it probably is. Your safety is worth more than being nice to a stranger. My name is Lila, and this happened in March of 2025, just under a year ago. At the time, I was 34 years old and had just finalized my divorce after what felt like the longest 2 years of my life. My ex-husband, Derek, wasn't physically abusive in the way you see in movies. He never hit me, but he controlled everything. Where I went, who I talked to, what I wore, how I spent money. He'd check my phone, accuse me of cheating when I worked late, and gaslight me until I questioned my own memory. When I finally left him, he made the divorce as difficult as possible. He contested everything, dragged out court dates, and sent me messages alternating between begging me to come back and calling me horrible things. But in March, it was finally over. The judge signed the papers, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My best friend Monica insisted we celebrate. She'd been by my side through the entire nightmare, letting me cry on her couch, helping me move into my tiny studio apartment, and reminding me that I deserved better. We arrived around 7:00 p.m. on a Friday night. The place was moderately busy but not packed. Jazz music played softly in the background, and the warm lighting made everything feel comfortable. I was wearing a new dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion, a deep emerald green that made me feel confident and beautiful. For the first time in years, I felt like myself. Monica and I grabbed a table near the back, ordered a bottle of Pinot Noir, and toasted to freedom. I pulled out my phone and took a selfie of us holding our glasses, both of us grinning. I posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Officially free. Here's to new beginnings, and tagged the location. We spent the next hour laughing, talking about the future, and making plans for a trip to the coast that summer. I felt lighter than I had in years. The wine helped, but it was more than that. It was the absence of fear, the absence of waiting for someone to yell at me or tell me I was doing something wrong. That's when I noticed him. There was a man sitting 2 tables away, alone, nursing what looked like a whiskey. He was probably late 30s, clean cut, wearing a button-down shirt and jeans. Not threatening at first glance. Just another person at a wine bar. But he was staring at me. Not casually glancing, but staring with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I tried to ignore it and focus on Monica, but every time I looked up, he was still watching. About 20 minutes later, our server came over with a new bottle of wine. "This is from the gentleman over there," she said, gesturing toward the man. "He said to tell you he thinks you're beautiful and hopes you're having a wonderful evening." Monica and I exchanged a look. I felt flattered but also uneasy. I gave a polite wave toward him and he raised his glass with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Should we send it back?" Monica whispered. "I don't know," I said. "That feels rude. Maybe he's just being nice." A few minutes later, he stood up and walked over to our table. "Hey, sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice smooth and friendly. "I just wanted to say I hope you don't mind the wine. You both looked like you were having such a great time, and I thought I'd contribute to the celebration." He extended his hand. "I'm Brian." I hesitated, then shook his hand. "I'm Lila. This is Monica." Monica gave him a tight smile but didn't offer her hand. "So, what's the occasion?" Brian asked, pulling out the chair at our table and sitting down without being invited. Monica shot me a warning look, but I was still in that euphoric post-divorce, everything is going to be okay headspace. I didn't want to be rude. "I just finalized my divorce," I said, immediately regretting how much I'd shared. His face lit up with exaggerated sympathy. "Oh wow. Well, congratulations, I guess. Divorce is rough. I went through one myself a few years ago. Crazy ex-wife. She made my life hell." He laughed, and I forced a polite chuckle. Monica was staring at him, unsmiling. "So, where are you living now?" Brian asked. "Did you keep the house, or did you have to start over?" The question felt too personal, but I answered anyway. "I've got a studio apartment in North Portland. Just me now." "North Portland," he repeated, nodding slowly. "Nice area. Quiet. You live in alone?" That's when the alarm bell started ringing faintly in the back of my mind. Why would he ask that? "She's got a roommate," Monica cut in, her voice firm. Brian glanced at her, then back at me. "That's smart. Gotta be safe, especially after a divorce. Does your ex-husband still come around? Some guys can't let go." "No," I said quickly. "He's out of the picture." "Good," Brian said, but the way he said it felt wrong, like he was cataloging information. He stayed at our table for another 15 minutes, asking more questions. Where I worked, how long I'd been married, whether I was on dating apps yet. I answered vaguely and Monica kept trying to steer the conversation away, but Brian seemed oblivious to the social cues. Finally, Monica stood up. "Lila, our Uber's almost here. We should get going." We hadn't called an Uber, but I caught on immediately and stood up too. Brian's expression shifted. The friendly smile faltered. "Already? I was hoping we could keep talking. I could walk you both to your car. The parking lot around here can be sketchy at night." "We're good," Monica said, "but thanks for the wine." He stood up, blocking our path slightly. "Come on, I bought you a whole bottle. The least you could do is let me make sure you get to your car safely." "We're fine," Monica repeated, her tone harder now. Brian stared at me, ignoring Monica entirely. "Lila, I'm just trying to be nice here. After everything you've been through, I thought you'd appreciate someone looking out for you." "I appreciate it," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "But we really need to go." His face changed completely. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something cold and angry. "Ungrateful," he muttered. "I buy you wine, I'm polite, I try to have a conversation, and this is how you treat me?" "Excuse me," Monica said, stepping between us. "You're just like all women," Brian said, his voice rising. "You take and take and take, and then you act like the guy's the problem. You know what? You probably deserved whatever your ex-husband did to you." My stomach dropped. Other people in the bar were starting to look over. "You need to leave," Monica said loudly. A bouncer appeared from near the bar. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Brian threw up his hands in mock surrender. "Fine, whatever. Enjoy your sad little life, Lila." The way he said my name made my blood run cold. How did he know my name? I'd only introduced myself once. The bouncer escorted him toward the door, and Brian turned back one more time, staring directly at me. "I know who you are," he said, then disappeared through the exit. Monica grabbed my arm. "We're not leaving yet. We're waiting until we're sure he's gone." We sat back down, and Monica went to talk to the manager. I was shaking. The bartender brought us water and apologized, saying they'd keep an eye out and make sure he didn't come back. We waited 30 minutes. The manager walked through the parking lot and confirmed Brian's car was gone. Only then did we leave. Monica walked me to my car, which was parked under a streetlight. Everything seemed fine until I noticed something tucked under my windshield wiper. It was a folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I pulled it out and opened it. Written in neat handwriting, Lila Thompson, 2847, in Willamette Boulevard D, Apt 6. TL Lila New Beginnings on Instagram. "You looked beautiful tonight. See you soon." I felt like I couldn't breathe. That was my full name, my exact address, my Instagram handle. "Oh my God," Monica whispered, staring at the note. I looked around the parking lot, suddenly terrified he was still watching. Monica pulled out her phone and called 911. The police arrived within 10 minutes. I showed them the note, explained what had happened inside the bar, and gave them Brian's description. One of the officers looked at my Instagram on his phone. "Ma'am, did you post from this location tonight?" I nodded. "Your location services are on. Anyone can see exactly where you are when you post." My heart sank. I'd been so excited about celebrating that I hadn't thought twice about tagging the vineyard. The officer pulled up my most recent post, the selfie of Monica and me. He could have seen this, known you were here, and come specifically to find you. I felt sick. This wasn't a random encounter. Brian had hunted me. The police took the note as evidence and told me to file a restraining order. They checked the bar's security footage and got a clear image of Brian, but without a last name, it would take time to identify him. I went home that night terrified. Monica stayed with me, and we checked every lock on every window and door. I deleted my Instagram account entirely. I deleted Facebook, TikTok, everything. Over the next few weeks, I heard nothing from Brian. No messages, no sightings, nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, watching. Then, 2 months later, I got a call from the police. They'd identified him. His name was Brian Kellerman, and he had a history. Multiple restraining orders from other women. A prior arrest for stalking. He'd been doing this for years. He was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. I testified at his hearing, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison and mandatory counseling. But even now, almost a year later, I'm still looking over my shoulder. I don't post on social media anymore. I'm careful about where I go and who I tell. That night was supposed to be about freedom, but it taught me that leaving one dangerous man doesn't mean you're safe from others. Some predators don't need to know you. They just need to see an opportunity. Be extremely careful about sharing your location on social media, especially in real time. Predators actively monitor posts for vulnerable targets. If you're celebrating something personal like a divorce, breakup, or major life change, consider waiting to post until after you've left the location. Disable location services on your social media apps. And if someone's behavior makes you uncomfortable, trust that instinct immediately. Your safety is worth more than being polite. Don't wait to see if it gets worse. My name is Nancy, and this happened between September 2020 and March 2021, right in the middle of COVID lockdowns. I was 20 years old at the time, and I'd just rented my first apartment by myself for my junior year at Boston University. The building was an old converted Victorian house in Allston, split into 6 units. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. A small studio on the third floor with hardwood floors, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom that had probably been installed in the 1970s. The rent was affordable, and my landlord seemed decent enough during the walkthrough. He mentioned in passing that the tenant directly below me was very quiet and kept to himself. I didn't think much of it. I was just excited to finally have my own space. I moved in on a Saturday in early September. The building was eerily quiet. Most tenants were students like me, and with COVID, a lot of people had chosen to stay home and do remote classes. I was one of the few who'd decided to come back to campus even though most of my classes were online. The first few weeks were uneventful. I set up my little studio, got into a routine of attending Zoom classes from my desk, and tried to make the best of a lonely semester. I barely saw my neighbors. The building felt like a ghost town. Then, about 3 weeks in, I started noticing something strange. Around 3:00 a.m., I'd wake up to a rhythmic banging sound coming from directly below me. It sounded like someone hitting the ceiling with a broom or a stick. 3 loud bangs, a pause, then 3 more. It would go on for several minutes before stopping. At first, I assumed my downstairs neighbor was annoyed that I was walking around late at night. Maybe I'd been too loud getting water or going to the bathroom. I felt bad about it, so I wrote a polite apology note and slipped it under his door the next morning. I never got a response. But the banging continued every single night. By October, things started getting worse. I came home one afternoon from a grocery run and noticed the handle of my apartment door was covered in something sticky and wet. It looked like syrup or honey smeared all over the metal. I cleaned it off, confused and a little grossed out, and mentioned it to my landlord over text. He said he'd look into it, but never followed up. A few nights later, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard a voice coming from below. It was muffled at first, but then it got louder. A man's voice shouting something I couldn't quite make out. It sounded angry. Then I heard it clearly. N-A-N-C. Nancy. Nancy. N-A-N-C we. My blood went cold. I'd never introduced myself to the downstairs neighbor. I'd never even seen him. How did he know my name? I sat up in bed, frozen, listening. The shouting stopped as suddenly as it had started. The apartment below went silent. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I found a note slid under my door. It was written in shaky handwriting on a torn piece of notebook paper. I can hear everything you do, every step, every breath. Stop moving so much. I felt sick reading it. I immediately texted my landlord, sent him a photo of the note, and told him I was uncomfortable. He replied saying the tenant below me, a man named Carl, had some mental health issues, but was harmless, and had lived there for years without problems. That word, harmless, didn't make me feel any better. Over the next few weeks, more notes appeared. They were always slid under my door at random times, usually when I wasn't home. Why do you walk like that? You're trying to tempt me. I know when you're awake. I know when you sleep. You think you're better than me. I reported every single one to my landlord. He kept saying he'd talk to Carl, but nothing changed. By November, I started noticing Carl himself. I'd come home and see a face pressed against the window of the unit below mine, partially visible through a gap in the curtain. He was always watching. One evening, I walked around to the back of the building to take out my trash, and I saw him standing in the shared backyard. He was just standing there in the dark, staring up at my window. When I got closer, I realized he was holding binoculars. I ran back inside and called the police. 2 officers came about 20 minutes later. They went down and spoke to Carl, then came back up to talk to me. They said he seemed confused, but wasn't threatening. One officer suggested I start documenting everything just in case. They couldn't do anything unless he actually hurt me or made a direct threat. That's when I realized I was on my own. In December, things escalated. I came home one afternoon and noticed my doormat had been moved. It was facing the wrong direction. Then I saw that the small potted plant I kept outside my door was gone. A few hours later, I went downstairs to check my mailbox and saw my plant sitting on Carl's doorstep. He was taking my things. I stopped keeping anything outside my door. I started putting a chair against my door at night, even though it had a deadbolt. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was trying to get in. The banging from below got worse. It wasn't just at night anymore. Every time I walked across my apartment, I could hear him following my footsteps from below. If I went to the kitchen, he'd bang directly under the kitchen. If I moved to the bathroom, the banging would track me there. It was like he was mapping my movements. One night in early January, I was lying in bed working on my laptop when I heard a new sound. Scraping. It was coming from my door. I got up slowly, my heart pounding, and tiptoed to the peephole. Carl was crouched outside my door, scratching at the wood with something metal. I could see his face through the peephole, illuminated by the hallway light. His eyes were wide, and he was muttering something to himself. I screamed. He immediately ran back downstairs. I called the police again. They came, talked to him again, and he told them he was checking for mice. They couldn't arrest him for that. The building management said they couldn't evict him without proof of an actual threat. I felt trapped. By late February, I was barely sleeping. I kept my phone next to me at all times, ready to call 911. I stopped cooking because I didn't want him to hear me in the kitchen. I stopped showering at night. I moved as little as possible, trying to be invisible. Then, on a Friday night in early March, everything came to a head. I was sitting on my bed with my laptop, working on an essay, when I heard a loud mechanical sound from below. It sounded like a drill or a saw. Then I felt something near my foot. I looked down and saw a drill bit puncturing my floor from below. It came up through the wood, just inches from where I was sitting. I screamed and jumped off the bed. The drill pulled back down, and then another hole appeared a few feet away. Then another. He was drilling holes in his ceiling, my floor, trying to reach me. I grabbed my phone and ran out into the hallway, shaking so hard I could barely dial. I called 911 and screamed into the phone that someone was breaking through my floor. The police arrived within minutes. They forced their way into Carl's apartment, and what they found made my stomach turn. His walls were covered in photos of me. Some were screenshots from my social media accounts. Others were photos taken through my window, zoomed-in shots of me sitting at my desk or lying in bed. There were hundreds of them. In the center of one wall was a shrine. My name was written over and over again in marker, crayon, pen, covering every inch of space. There were drawings of me, distorted and creepy, alongside printed photos. He'd drilled 7 holes into his ceiling, 7 punctures into my floor. Carl was arrested that night. The psychiatric evaluation revealed he'd been diagnosed with erotomania, a delusional disorder where he believed I was in love with him. He thought the sounds of me moving around above him were a form of communication. He thought I was sending him messages. I broke my lease the next day. I moved in with a friend and never went back to that building. Even now, 3 years later, I can't live on an upper floor. I can't handle the idea of someone being below me. I check the ceilings of every apartment I visit. I'm hyper aware of every sound. That building was supposed to be my first taste of independence. Instead, it became a nightmare I'll never fully escape. If you're ever in a situation where someone's behavior is escalating, trust your instincts and document everything. Take photos, save notes, record incidents with dates and times. Contact police every time, even if they can't act immediately, because it creates a paper trail. And if your landlord or authorities dismiss your concerns, keep pushing. Your safety matters more than being polite or worrying about overreacting. Don't wait until it's too late.